everybody. This is Matt Orozco from Macabre Daily, and I'm extremely grateful to be joined with Ethan Beagle today, who is quite a few titles, but most recently was the supervising sound editor on HBO's Minx television show. And he's got quite a few credits under his name. I counted over 190, working on fellows different films, including Transformers: Revenge of the Fallen, Black Dahlia, Malevolence, which is something I'm sure quite a few of our horror films will know from back in the day, and then quite a few TV shows as well, including Riverdale, You, Supergirl, and of course the aforementioned Minx. So, Ethan, it's a pleasure to have you. Welcome to our interview, and if you could just tell folks a little about yourself, and more directly, the role that you have of supervising sound editor, as well as the many others.
Yeah, so my name's Ethan. I am currently a supervising sound editor, which is kind of the director of the non-musical soundtrack. I am responsible for every sound in some way that you hear that is not being created by the composer of the music of the movie. So that means every word of dialogue, every bird, cricket, gunshot, weird boom, sting, shing, whatever, that all eventually passes through me. And I sort of lead a team of people that collects and curates and creates those sounds. Um, it's a two-part process. If you paid attention to the Oscars up until recently, there were two categories. There was sound editing and there was sound mixing. The editing side are the people that create and collect the sounds and organize them. That is my direct crew that I work with. And then there's the mixing side where they take all of those sounds, they take the music from the composer, and they will balance them uh, in a way that it sounds like a movie. They'll sit in a movie theater with a console that has faders and buttons and all sorts of things. And in theory, I am responsible for as the go-between of the editing and the mixing side. So I sort of get my fingers a little bit in both pies on that. I'm also the um, the liaison between the creative leads of the movie, whether it's the director or in television, it's usually what's called the showrunner, the writer, top head writer, producer. And I am their expert sound person that they tell me the ideas that they have, and then I tell my crew how we should go about getting it. So yeah, basically everything you hear, I have some responsibility for in some way.
It sounds really interesting because again, you get to. It sounds like you're working on both sides of the production. Is that a fair statement to say that you're doing a bit of work on the pre-production side, or sorry, rather, really during production, and then also in the post-production to validate kind of the vision and the output?
Um, there's not as much work with the production crew as much as I'd probably like to be involved. Production sound mixing is kind of a different art form. They are responsible for recording the sounds that occur on set. And in reality, the most important thing by a lot is they are responsible for recording the dialogue that the actors say. Everything else is extraneous, and if they can get it, great. They almost never have time to go ahead and do things like that. But so I will work with them kind of in terms of like trying to make sure that they're recording the things that I need in order to produce the final soundtrack. And then if there's some things that are consistent issues or problems, then we will work with the production sound mixer and the assistant directors and the producers who are supervising the actual production and trying to work out some problems like certain locations that might be just like super noisy. Is there anything we can do to help out with that? But that's very rare, and really, like, for me to step on production's toes, something has to be pretty catastrophically and consistently bad. Uh, so Yeah, but we talk because the production mixers need to organize their recordings in such a way that I can use them easier. We have a meeting before they start shooting usually, where we talk about that stuff and make sure that our workflow is the most efficient way to do it. But um, the reality is, on a lot of projects, I don't have anything to do with the production. I get it long after production is finished, especially with independent movies. I don't get the movie until they're almost done picture editing the movie, and then they come to me. And by that point, it's like that ship has long since sailed. We have what we have, and we're going to have to work with what we've got, and we'll fix it from there.
It's interesting the way you're describing it. It kind of makes it even sound a lot like how there's the visual editing side of post production where take everything stuff we all the stuff we film, let's put it together and make it a cohesive story. You're kind of doing that for the sound. It sounds like where again everything save the score is being handled by you to create that ultimate kind of experience.
Yeah,
Um, and I mean, I think it goes without saying that I've had a discussion with a friend of mine not long ago that, you know, editing in all of its forms when it comes to film and television, it really is, I think, probably one of the most important things that happens within the creation of the film because it tells you how to feel and respond to everything that's being created. And I'm curious, how you got started in not just the industry, but also your interest in the sound elements of sound design and film and television.
well, I was always interested in film and less TV when I was growing up, but movies were my thing, like as a kid. And eventually, I learned that one could go study movies, like as a college degree, and that was way better than going to medical school or something. So I went that route. So yeah, I went to NYU for undergraduate film school, and while I was there, you get the opportunity to experiment with all sorts of different disciplines. So I think if my memory is correct, and it might not be entirely correct, but if my memory is correct, we most people want to be either writers or directors. Like that was kind of the glory job that you
Yeah.
wanted to get. But when you got there, you kind of found your thing. And so I have friends who became picture editors. I had friends who became cinematographers. A bunch became producers, and it wasn't until my senior year I was actually going to be a producer. That was sort of what I gravitated to. In my senior year in college, I realized that I didn't know anything about how to do sound, so I took the classes just so I could learn how to produce a movie all the way to completion. And I really, really enjoyed it. I was a musician in high school. I was in the band, and was total band geek, and
Same here.
yep. And so there was a lot about it that really appealed to me. And I think I just sort of realized that, like, somewhere in the course of film school, you realize that filmmaking is so collaborative that just because I didn't, necessarily follow through on directing, didn't mean that I couldn't be storytelling. Like
Yeah.
ultimately, like the appeal of movies to me more than say music was, which is what I grew up doing, was I wanted to tell stories, you know, orally, visually, whatever, and then using my audio, all the practice that I had done listening as a member of the band or whatever was sort of a natural fit for me to move into the audio space. And I then just really pursued that really, really hard after that. So I graduated. I had a job in distribution that I ended up losing. And by some serendipitous experience, I bumped into my sound design teacher from NYU. He was playing saxophone on the subway one day. And I bumped into him and told him I was unemployed and I really wanted to get into sound. And did he know of anything? And it turned out that he was working for a studio that had a job opening. And the next week, I started as an editor at this small independent sound facility. And I've just been chugging ever since for the last 20 something years.
The story or the way you explain your film school experience kind of brings back a lot of memories for me because I myself also realized, my freshman year that, oh, wow, you can actually go to school for this.
Right.
And someone's going to give you a piece of paper that says you're official now when you're done. But it was that the process you described of people starting to kind of divide themselves into their respective areas closer towards the end really became quite apparent. I started out wanting to be a director, ended up being more interested in kind of the theory and aesthetics side
Hmm.
of the business. Now that doesn't translate really well into a career. So my fandom took precedent over my career purpose, but it really was kind of such a you do get to try so much in film school, and given your background with music, it sounds like sound was a relatively natural progression for you. But did you really notice any? But it also wasn't the maybe intention you were going to start with. Have you dabbled in other aspects outside of the sound realm since kind of getting out of film school? And
Yeah. Unfortunately, as a hobby, because I'm so busy, I haven't like been able to really break away. I've done my own writing. You know, actually, like my career in sound and the development of that has really um, given me a lot of confidence in my ability to tell stories not using sound. And I think there's something about being in sound and being at the end of the process of filmmaking, because we really are kind of the last real creative step of the filmmaking process. And I get to talk to on a regular basis the writers and the directors. And by the time they get to me, all the mistakes they've made along the way have been magnified. It's the old pinwheel effect. Something changes here, and something way up here is amplified by whatever mistake happened here. And so I've gotten to have a lot of conversations about the things that they wish they could have done differently in the course of telling the story and things like that. And also, there's the cliche, we'll fix it in the mix. There's so much of my job is trying to smooth out some of the warts in the storytelling, and to accentuate and emphasize things. And I think during that process, I've gained a lot of confidence in my own ability to sort of evaluate my own work. Um, and also because I'm an editor. I think there's a reason that we're called editors. We do a thing and then we go back and we edit it and we revise it and we cut it up and move things around and try different things. And I've really embraced that process in a way that I don't think I did back when I was in college. When I was in high school and college, I wrote a paper once. I might review it to find some typos, but I never sat and like thought about, is there a better way for me to write this essay? Like
yeah,
I didn't have that work ethic back then that I do now. So yeah, I've somewhat relatively recently, although with COVID and time flying by so fast, I couldn't even tell you how long ago it was. It's probably longer than I thought. Like I've written some scripts that I'm actually kind of proud of, like, and I've written some that I read them and I'm like, okay, I know how to fix this. Like I think I know where the problems are in this and I can fix it. I just need to sit down and do it. And the sitting down and doing it, that's the tricky part. But yeah, I definitely do a lot of storytelling outside of my job, writing scripts. During COVID, I started getting back into Dungeons and Dragons, which is, storyteller's paradise.
yeah,
Um,
definitely.
yeah, so there's been I'm certainly not creatively unsatisfied in terms of like being able to practice this stuff and have a great time just putting it out there, even if it might be terrible. It's like might be terrible, but I know that we can fix it. Like
Yeah.
first draft, let's go. Let's see what we need to do. And that's that was a revelation that I wish I had when I was in film school, but I was, 18 years old and thought I knew everything already, I guess.
Hindsight's 2020, and I feel like the reason why it's maybe easier, and I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on this as well. But when you're younger, you tend to act before you think, and so you tend to presume or assume that you can do it. You just have to just do it, and then whatever happens happens. Whereas as you get older, you realize that maybe your first effort isn't your best effort, and if you know that there's a chance to go and revise. So, maybe it's just the just general time of being an age and profession that's giving you this wisdom around knowing what the role of editing, but also the importance of it and how you embrace it in your own work.
Yeah, and I think there's a respect for practice that I don't think I had when I was 18. And I've talked to my wife about this, who's a science teacher, and there's a always this stigma of, well, I'm just not good at science, and it's like, that's not true. Like, you just need to practice. When I was in college, I never wrote anything that I thought was worth spending the money on to direct. But when I look back at the ideas I had and the things that I wanted to do, I don't know that that's actually true. I just don't think I knew how to work the project to the point where it became something worth spending the money on. There's and I know this now because I've had this life experience or career experience of working with a lot of very well known, very respected filmmakers, in all disciplines. And the thing that they all have in common is that they're constantly doing it. And they're constantly making mistakes. We like to sort of talk about, people like, you can take anybody, Spielberg, oh, what a genius storyteller Steven Spielberg is. And it's like, part of why he's so good at it is because he never stops doing it, you know? And so I'm a good sound editor, because I do it every day for 10 hours a day, and I've been doing it for 20 years. So my instincts are a lot more refined than somebody else, but that comes with just hours and hours and hours of experience doing it. It's not this mythical mystery thing. Like, none of these people had, a magic wand tapped on their head and said, "You genius." Whatever. They're they're consumed by doing it. And that's what ultimately results in them being great at it, is just constantly doing it and acknowledging that, sometimes they do it badly.
Yeah.
you know I mean, the best filmmakers in the world, they've all got stinkers on their resume somewhere. Uh, so, and I'm sure, like, if they watched it, they'd be like, yeah, that movie's not my best effort. But they don't stop either. They go back, and the whole process, they were trying to make it better. And so yeah, that's the thing. It's not inaccessible. It
Yeah.
just requires energy to do it. And for me, sound, I think, I discovered sound in film school and producing too, because that's what I would have ended up doing if I didn't find sound. But those were the two things that I could spend all my energy doing. Um, I loved it. Like, I would think about all of it. Just when I wasn't working on it, I was thinking about it. And that's Fortunately, I've been able to carve out a career doing one of those things where the thing that I always thought about every day at night, I now wake up the next day and go ahead and just do it.
So that's a serendipitous place to be where you kind of have that perfect harmony of passion and profession, kind of coming together. And
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it comes down to the realization that what I really wanted to do was be in the movie industry. Um, it wasn't one thing or nothing. It wasn't, directing or nothing. Like, if I couldn't direct, I was just going to quit and go do something else. Like, that wasn't an option. Like, I wanted to make movies, and I wanted to be part of this community. And I didn't focus specifically on one thing at that time. I experimented until I found something that I really liked. And I have, even within sound, there's so many options for things that you can do as a sound person. You can be a mixer, you can be an editor, you can be a production sound recordist, you can be a field sound recordist, you can be a Foley artist or a Foley recordist. You can be a dialogue editor, sound effects editor. You can just work on audio commentaries. You can do foreign language versions of mixes of things like that. Like, I have friends who specialize in all these different facets, and there's dozens of them. So, like, if you're really into sound, say, like you're a musician who loves recording things, so many of my friends were all music people who got into the movie business because they really just loved recording things and playing with faders and knobs and listening. They loved listening. And maybe they started wanting to be in music, but they've migrated over to being in film because it's just, you know, it's the street over here. They're
Yeah,
all leading to the same
same
path,
neighborhood.
which is, yeah, it's all happiness in your day-to-day work. And if you're happy pushing buttons and knobs and recording things, there's a lot of different avenues that you can take. Um, and for me, happiness was being in the movie business. Um, if I was a critic, I'd be probably just as happy sitting there watching movies every day as I am making them. And if I was a director, I'd be happy. If I was a producer, I'd be happy. And I'm a sound guy and I love it. And it's turned into a fantastic career. No complaints.
Well, it's what you're saying. I think resonates with a lot of people I've spoken with before. We've talked to folks that have worked, largely a lot of independent film production, but also some folks like yourself who've worked in some larger productions, studio films as well. And the common theme across all of them has been the same thing: is that they just love the industry. They love movies, or they love TV. They love something, and they just want to be around that. And they end up trying a few different things to find out where they ultimately have either the most success or they get the most out of it. And what I've seen time and time again is that just what you said is what separates everybody is just the act of actually doing it, is making it their life's purpose and not something that they, just do as a hobby. Because you can pursue these things as a hobby, but that also means you'll probably never make a career out of it, because these are not,
Right.
These are things, as you said, that require lots of time, effort, attention, practice, and revisiting. And, thinking about your roles, and it looked like, if I kind of looked at a lot of your history, and I tried to do my best to try and figure out some of the things you're doing, but you were doing everything from re-recording mixer, which I think sounds like you were actually going back and fixing dialogue and doing voiceover work that gets added in later. ADR type of stuff. So it's, you yourself have moved around to different parts of the sound element. And that's just one facet of filmmaking.
Right. Yeah. So the re-recording mixer credit is not misnamed, but it's a slightly archaic name. The re-recording mixer is the mixer, the post-production mixer. The person who I said takes all these sounds, puts them together, places them around the room, decides how loud they should be, and all that. The reason why they're called the re-recording mixer is back in the day. Actually, today we still do this, but you take all these sounds, you balance them out, then you re-record them somewhere else into its final one file. This is the mix. Like imagine, I guess the easiest way to imagine this is imagine in music, you have all these instruments playing, and the mixer will take all the instruments, balance them out, make the song, and then re-record it as a stereo track that you can then listen to on iTunes. Um, so they are re-recording the mix that they did. So yeah, that's
All right, so sorry for the technical difficulties there. But you just had gotten finished explaining kind of the difference, kind of the re-recording mixer as being actually somewhat of a, what's that word?
it's
A
kind of mislabeled. It's
misnomer. Yeah,
not.
misnomer.
Yeah, it's technically correct, but if you say that to people, they're just gonna shrug and be like, I don't know what that is. But yeah, the re-recording mixer are the people who balance all the sounds. The process of actually re-recording dialogue is what we call ADR, which is automated dialogue replacement, where we'll bring in an actor into a studio and they will lip sync to the picture and redo their performance for any number of reasons, technical performance, whatever. So yeah, that's the actual re-recording part. The re-recording mixer is re-recording all those sounds as a mix. I guess it's very confusing, weird. It's a weird business.
Yeah, well, like any industry, it has its nuances and kind of niches that kind of almost seemingly make sense to those that are in them. Sometimes require a little like elaboration or explanation. But I was curious, because as you were talking about this, how many give or take, how many files end up actually comprising the final mix that you're working with?
Files themselves, I couldn't even tell you. Too numerous to mention. We organize in what are called tracks. So um, we will put a sound effect on a track, um, and the way the group we organize them into categories. So there are a couple of tracks of dialogue where we will take all the dialogue in the movie. We will edit it and organize it so that either certain characters are on their own tracks or really a lot of times it's certain shots. So every time the camera edits to another shot, we have another track with another line of dialogue. And it's because it's digital, you can kind of go back and forth and whatever. And then there's going to be separate tracks of music, and each music track might have they'll usually give us stems, what are called stems, which are like the music cue, but just the horns, just the drums, just the piano, and that way we can have some control over how we hear all of that stuff. So there's going to be a bunch of music tracks. There's going to be a bunch of ADR tracks, which is where we re-record dialogue. There's going to be a bunch of what's called loop group or walla tracks where we bring a group of actors into the studio and record crowds and things like that. So if you're in a restaurant, all the people chattering will record actors in a room pretending that they're having dinner in that restaurant. And then there's sound effects. There's sound effects, doors, cars, things like that. There's sound design, which is all the non realistic stuff, all the booms and weird things that you might hear. There's backgrounds, the ambient sound, the air, the wind, the birds, and then there's Foley, which is ADR but for sound effects. The things where we record live in sync to picture. So people walking, all the footsteps, there'll be a person who's standing there walking in time to that person, and we'll have all these things will be laid out on groups of tracks. And on my TV shows, there's probably around 100 tracks, give or take, that the mixers have to sift through. The bigger the movie, the bigger you get. On Transformers, there was several hundred. And you go through this process where you get less and less as you go. So like you'll start out with like 500 or 600, and you'll mix them down into smaller groups, and so now you only be at like 200 tracks, and eventually you get to you're re-recording all of these things over and over again. The mixer is until you get to in a 5.1 environment, you have 6 tracks, and everything is comprised on 6 tracks, one for each speaker.
Wow.
So
So
that's the eventual collapse, the accordioning inward of the sounds.
so now that, I mean, because this tweaks my morbid curiosities to no end, because I'm a big, I have a lot of interest in the home theater experience, particularly the advancements in home theater sound. And I think I've been extremely impressed with things like Dolby Atmos as this ability to give you depth and depth of field sound and make that so compact in the home. So is it fair to say that as these additional sound elements get better, or these maybe I'm using the right term, like the surround sound elements going from 5.1 to 7.1 to this Atmos experience, does that in turn then generate more audio tracks that need to be brought into this?
Yeah, ultimately. And it takes a little bit more time for the mixers, especially because there's more decisions to be made. Dolby Atmos, which is sort of the biggest format now, they divide their setup into what's called 9.1, where 5.1 is a left speaker, a center speaker, a right speaker, and then a left rear and a right rear. Now they have and then 7.1 has a left side and a right side, and the 0.1 is the subwoofer. And then Atmos has a 9.1 where we have a left ceiling and a right ceiling. And then to make Atmos just a little bit more complicated, they have what's called object panning, where you have separate tracks that are not specifically assigned to any speaker. They're assigned to a point in the room, and you
Mm.
have a three-dimensional diagram of a room, and you can say, I want this sound to be right in that spot. Like I want it to be right above the top of my head right now,
Wow.
let's say, for example. And you can diffuse it, you can shape it, you can make it a mushroom shape so it sort of like diffuses out above my head, or you can do all sorts of weird things. And the software, the processor, will then know the speakers that are in your room, your specific room, and say, well, if the sound is supposed to be right there over my head, I need to fire the sound out of these speakers in this configuration so it sounds like it's coming right above my head in this spot in the room. And theoretically, we can go from room to room to room in all these different rooms that are all these different shapes, and the mix should sound relatively similar from one room to the next because you're placing sounds in a specific place. And so making those decisions is a little more complicated. Um,
Yeah.
you know, because with 5.1, for example, you are assigning the sound to a specific speaker. In Atmos, you're assigning the sound to a place in a room, which doesn't have a hard fixed wire that goes right to that place. So yeah, there's
Sorry, could you say that again?
no, you can't say that again. Sorry about that.
It's all good.
Oh man, my watch is too smart for me. Uh, so yeah, it's interesting, and we're now several years into it. I went to a screening a while ago, one of the first movies that was mixed in Atmos, and they had the mixer doing the Q&A, and they asked him how he would do things differently, and he actually said like he was being too fine with putting like this laser right in this one spot, and what had ended up happening was the people sitting in those seats were like being thrown back, and nobody else was having that experience. And so he's kind of like, I don't know, I feel like I needed to change some things with the way that I mixed because only this cluster of people got the experience of the sound that I wanted them to have. And the rest of the movie didn't. So we got to sort of, there's a lot more to think about now.
Yeah.
But also, there's a lot of playing around you can do. It's a lot of fun. Like you said, depth of matters. Like these soundtracks, you can get really loud and really muddy really fast, and you have to be careful of that. But you can also do a lot of really cool perspective things, and just sort of like sound is very visceral, so you can make people feel a certain way in a much more interesting way with Atmos than I think you could certainly with stereo or whatever. The more we get, the more it's interesting. But at the same time, you still need to look forward at a screen in front of you. So that's
Yeah.
still the focus. Even with all this stuff that we can whoosh around everywhere, you still don't want your audience ever looking away from the screen. So that's the priority.
Well, I see it as kind of like you're almost creating this invisible bubble when you're watching a movie, and the screen is kind of this, draws you in right at the center, so it keeps you, should keep you really focused right in that middle point. But the sound kind of makes that, kind of closes that bubble out in my mind. It kind of creates this environment around you where everything that you're seeing happening is happening almost feeling in a closer proximity because of that sound, the way it's designed, where you're watching it. These things being designed for theater viewing, and then of course with the advancements in home theater
Yeah,
technology.
yeah. I mean, philosophically, and to go with the film school mindset of this is sound is your immersion. It creates a sense of realism. What we're trying to do is sell the reality of the story and the place that the story is in. Um, and we want you to feel some way wherever you are. So, if you take, for example, like a person standing in the woods, you know, we want you to, as an audience member, we want you to be in the woods with them. So we want to immerse you in the location, and that's what we're going to do with the sounds that we pick. Now, which sounds do we pick? The woods can be a lot of different things. Do we want them to be haunted woods? Do we want them to be a peaceful, tranquil kind of woods? And the same person standing in the same woods, we can make you feel very different ways just by picking which kinds of natural sounds of the forest. Uh, that's going to determine how we pick that. What is our point of view, and how do we want the audience to feel? How do we want our character to feel? And so those are like the decisions that we think about when we're pulling and creating our soundtracks, to
What kind
create
of
a sense of
preparation do you do
realism.
for that? Because like I feel like to get, there's so much detail. I feel like in my head, I'm imagining someone goes out into a woods area that they're using as inspiration and they're noticing the sounds. But that's just my kind of guess. How do you prepare to create that immersion? Um,
Um, I mean, a certain amount of study helps because you're always working in genres or we've evolved pretty far in terms of how we watch movies that there's a certain response that we know that audience members are going to have to certain sounds. But you don't want to just sound cliched, like you don't always want to have the grandfather clock ticking in that room just because, maybe that's a cliche. And, actually the real cliche
Horror
that,
movie stinger, right?
yeah, I mean, that those are always going to be a thing because the big loud bang on a jump scare is always going to make an audience jump, which is why you see them all the time. I mean, I work on Riverdale. We are the sting and boom kings of television right now. I mean, they're all over that show, because we want to have that impact when you get there. A lot of it is conversations about the story and the places before we really start working in earnest on anything. We will watch the movie or the show with the creatives and talk about it. So, for the example of the person standing in the woods, we'll have a conversation with the director and being like, okay, like, how exactly do you want us to feel while we're standing in these woods? And they will say, I want to feel this sense of foreboding or something. And it's rarely specific. We kind of talk in the macro emotional. It's not like I want to hear a bird right in this spot and I want to hear a dog right in this spot or
it's
whatever. It's
daunting.
not.
It's to get that detail.
Yeah, that's our job, kind of decide where that is. But then we will talk about, it's like, look, our character is they're lost. They don't know where they are. Are they going to survive the woods? Okay, great. So we're going to make it lonely sounding, and we're going to pull certain kinds of winds, certain kinds of leaves blowing. We might have like the trees creaking in that one, where if the director said, no, like, this person's really happy and this is like they found their serenity or whatever, and they're standing here just basking in it, we're going to had a very different kind of wind. And we're not going to have the trees creaking in this eerie sort of creepy way, and we're not going to hear a creature over there rustling or whatever. It's we're using sound to sort of pull this Kuleshov effect type of thing where the same person in the same place can have a totally different feeling. But we have a conversation about that, and then it's our job and my team's job to find those sounds, whether from libraries that we've built over decades, and that we've borrowed from other people who have built them for decades, or we'll go out and record our own. It all depends on the project. Whatever the project needs, we will try to find a way to get that.
And you mentioned something about genre and kind of how people pull from different genres, or you kind of have landscapes that are more maybe going to be more common across certain genres. So do you tend to have a preference when you're looking at kind of the work you're doing? Obviously, I feel like it's a safe assumption to say you do whatever work you can get, or you get until you get to a point where you can be choosy. But also, do you find that you enjoy working on certain types of genres more than others?
Uh, no, oddly. No, I spent a good number of years working on the superhero shows on the CW, on the Flash and Supergirl, and I loved those shows. And now, I'm doing Riverdale, which is a very different kind of comic book show, and I do You, which is kind of a satirical, dark, you know, romantic murder show.
Thriller.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, and I mean, so those are very different shows, and I love doing all of them. I don't. I haven't had to. Well, I mean, you're kind of right in that you don't usually have the opportunity to be that choosy. because it's freelance work. Something kind of hopefully always comes up right when you need it, and you
Yeah.
take that one because it's like, well, if I don't, I'm not going to have a job for 6 months. So, like, I'm going to take that job. But I'm at the point in my career now where, for the most part, I sort of choose my projects, or my projects choose me because of the people on the project. Um, you know, we work so closely and intensely with people that if you don't like the people that you're working with, then the whole experience is going to be miserable. So
Yeah.
you find yourself working with kind of a cadre of the same people from project to project to project. So, um, well, for example, the people on Riverdale I hadn't ever worked with before, but the executive producers was Greg Berlanti's company, who I had worked with on The Flash and Supergirl. And so when that job became available, they recommended me, along with the person who did my job before I took that, as an old friend of mine. And he said, "You'll get along with these people. You should work. You should go work on this show with them. We'll recommend you for that show." So, like, you kind of know the people as you go. Um, I got involved with. The producer on You was somebody I worked on a pilot with a few years ago, and we always like wanted to work with each other again. I got Minx because the post production producer was, one of the very first shows I did. She was the post production producer on that, so she got me the interview with the creatives on that. So I'm kind of like in constant contact with a lot of people that we liked working together. And it's like, what's your new show? Oh, it's a workplace comedy for HBO. Like, this sounds great. Like, let's do it. Let's go work on that show. Um, so yeah, like, unfortunately, I haven't had to be choosy, um, but schedule allows, and I've developed a solid enough network of people who consistently work that I consistently work because we really enjoy working together.
And I think you can't put a price on that ability to kind of build a network over time. It's something, again, if you don't dedicate yourself to doing the work regularly,
Mhm.
you can't really build that network, which in turn makes the later parts of life a little bit easier in a career, rather than for the beginning parts being a bit more of a hustle and pray. It becomes more of a, now I've got a network of people that refer me in, but also that I've worked with or want to work with or can work with.
Yeah. Yeah, and you are kind of always building that. So, I mean, there's definitely cases where, like I said, Riverdale was an all new group of creatives that I hadn't worked for, but I came recommended from creatives that I had worked for. So there was sort of a little bit of a trust that we would get along. And then, yeah, like, I've gotten along great with them, and I'm doing a new Pretty Little Liars show that whole crew is making. So I'm getting to work on that with them. So yeah, when I had I had been mixing for so long on The Flash and on Supergirl that when I left that job to take the Riverdale job, I kind of knew, like, I still talk to all those producers and everything, and hopefully I'll get to work with them again. But also, like, I'm rebuilding a new brand of clients. You're always trying to build your network and using these recommendations and referrals. And they say the business is about who you know, and I wish I could dispel that notion, but it's kind of true.
Yeah, it seems to be that way. I've had a few friends that work in the industry, and a lot of it is luck and who you know. So and hopefully those things sometimes combine, but there's also that element of and technique, which again you get to the technical side of the business becomes increasingly more important.
Yeah, well, you have to be willing to jump through the door when it opens for you. I like the serendipitous thing of me bumping into my sound design teacher playing saxophone. Like, and he just happened to have a job, and I was like, "Yep, I'm doing it. Let's go." I got my first job in LA in a similar way, where I was living in New York, and I said I need to move to LA, and I feel like my growth as a sound person will be faster and higher than it was going to be in New York at the time. And I just cold called a bunch of people, and I happened to get a facility that, quite literally, as I was talking to them, they were having a big company meeting about hiring more people. And so my resume was coming through on the fax machine right as that meeting let out, and was like, oh yeah, this looks like a good candidate to hire. And so, I got that job. And then it's about keeping relationships alive after that. So while I was at that job, I was working in the machine room, and still with my ambition to mix and be a supervising sound editor. And there was a people that would constantly come in on projects, different TV shows, different mixers, different sound editors, and you start to talk to them, and you get a pretty good sense early on of which ones are the ones who are willing to help younger people and which ones are not. And you talk to the ones who are, and ask, will you look at some things that I did, and hope that they like them and say, you have some potential, let's see what you can do. And then they give you a gig. My first on-screen network mixing credit was entirely that. um, I was the machine room. I was what's called the mix tech, or the recordist, and I was working behind the scenes on a show. And one of the mixers found out that they couldn't come into work that morning. And there's two mixers. There's a person who mixes dialogue and music, and then a person who mixes the sound effects. And the other one was somebody who I'd been talking to, and I'd been his engineer for most of that season. And I showed him films that I had mixed. I showed him films that I had edited. And when he found out, at 8:30 in the morning, that his partner wasn't going to come in, he's just like, "What are you doing today?" And I was like, "Well, I'm your machine room guy today." And he's like, "Oh, have a seat. You're going to mix the show today." And
Like you
that
said,
was
ready to
it.
jump to the door, right?
Yeah, and it was just like, okay. And you know what? If I had another job, like if I had a voice recording section or something that I had to do, I probably would have gone into the office and been like, "Can you get somebody to cover that for me? Because like I have the chance to sit in the chair today." And they probably been like, "Yeah, go sit in the chair. We'll get somebody to cover for you." And from that moment on, like that dialogue mixer, he kind of became my unpaid agent. He started referring my name to a whole bunch of people. The company that he worked for, I started working on shows. The Transformers job, a friend of his called him and said, "You know any mixers who can come and help us out? We're desperate, like we're in the home stretch." And he called me, and I got that job. And so, yeah, like, um, be nice to people, be good at your job, and when they offer you something, don't say no.
That sounds like good advice, generally speaking, but at
Yeah,
Seek
I mean,
particularly.
it sounds so simple. Obviously, like, I can't say that I haven't been extremely fortunate, but I have been willing to jump headfirst into whatever opportunity presented itself.
I think the element of luck starts to become less relevant once experience picks up, right? So, once you get your name out there, you build your network, your cadre of people, it becomes less
Right.
about, being at the right place for a time, but more just you've been in enough of the right places at enough of the right times where people know that, you can deliver a certain quality of work, or, they know that you're gonna, you're gonna show up on time, you're gonna do what's expected, all those things kind of
Yeah.
comes with yourself. So you build your brand well enough, the rest over time should in turn follow in some regard.
Yeah, I mean, I've been doing this now for 20 years, and I'm at a point in my career where the referrals that happen mean something more now than say they did 15 years ago. And partially because the people who are referring to me are well known throughout the industry and trustworthy and whatever. And my credits are robust enough that people look at my credits and be like, "Oh, I've heard of that show." Okay. Um, there's still always a bit of a fight. Um,
Sure.
there's I don't have any Emmys. I don't have any Oscars. A couple years ago, I interviewed for a job, and they didn't want me because I didn't have any premium TV credits. And and it was kind of like, but the clients, like the filmmakers, know who I am. So like this was like a producer who like is like, well, yeah, they don't really have, and the filmmakers are kind of like, but we know they can do the
Yeah.
job, and somehow that still didn't matter. It was still like, so like it's very easy to get pigeonholed.
Sure.
It's very easy to, part of why I wanted to get switched again from mixing to sound editing, to supervising sound editing, was in part because I didn't want to get pigeonholed. And you're kind of always fighting. You always have to fight for yourself and your abilities. And even now, 20 years in, with the credits that I have, um, and the quality of work that I've done, it's still a conversation. I'm still getting put up against people that I have no chance of getting the job. You know, like I've had plenty of times where a salesperson at the facility will be like, "Okay, I put your name up to these clients," and I'm like, "Okay, well, who else did you put up?" And they tell me the names of the people that they put up. And I was like, "Yeah, okay, I'm not getting that one." Like,
Thanks for
you
stacking
got
them against me, guys.
it's like you got 3 Oscar winners in there. Like they're not taking like if I were their clients, I wouldn't take me. But Minx was one where um, I was up against some heavy hitters there, and I did get you. So you got to always do the interview, and I ended up getting the job against people who I've known for a long time, and they're really great at what they do, and somehow I still got the job. So certainly don't ever not try.
It's got to be a humbling experience to be at that point, where things are happening like that, and you're up against people that you either admire, respect, or know that they do good work. So knowing you're up for the same opportunities even can is a
Well,
sign of
sure. I mean,
validation.
well, yeah, and I can think that's kind of the way that you have to look at it. Is I'm at a level where I get put up, and I have a legitimate chance at getting those jobs. I say like it's like, wow, they're not going to pick me. Why would they pick me? Um, Sometimes they do,
Yeah.
and like I go into it knowing that I can do the work. Like um, I have a tremendous amount of respect and admiration for those people, and I've worked with a number of them, and I've learned a ton. But it also just goes to show there's still places I want to go. Like my ambition isn't tapped out, which is a great thing to have. I feel like I'm always getting better at my job. I feel like when somebody asks like what's the project you're most proud of, it still is consistently the one I just finished because I
Mm.
feel like we did things in that project that I hadn't done before and we did them well. Um, and so I'm constantly still trying to climb the ladder. I don't know that there's a peak, which is kind of
I would
also
agree with
fun.
you. I think in general, when it comes to mastering your craft, you never know everything. It's almost impossible to know everything about something because things
Right.
evolve. Technology evolves, process evolves, the way you do things might change. I mean, uh, there's so much that goes into the evolution of something that to fully master it, you have to be somehow supernatural. And I think about, and as you're talking, I wonder what are some of the things that have inspired you throughout your career, but also continue to inspire you as you think about the work you're going into or the work you're preparing for.
Um, hmm. The I mean, the projects themselves serve as their own inspiration. There is always something unique in them, and something that I haven't done before. There's always, and if even if even years down the line on the same project, there's still something, because the writers and the creatives are all trying things, and we sort of again like a lot of it comes down to the people. Is like we're still constantly trying to feed off of each other. We're still trying to push each other to try something new and interesting and different. And so every project I look at, I try to find the thing that is really appealing to me, that I want to go to. And that's kind of the interview question that always gets asked is in the times when I get to interview where I've actually been able to read the script, say, which has been fewer than you would think. But um, I did that with Minx. I did that with another show that I didn't get. But the question is always, okay, well, you read the script, so like, what do you think? What's interesting about the sound work to you? Um, and so like, I didn't prepare the answer necessarily to have an answer to that question because I knew the interview question was coming. You prepare the answer because it's just like this is what I'm gonna do. Like, why am I sitting here having this interview if there's nothing interesting about this job to me? Um, so like I already have the answer on any of those questions of why I want to do the show because I've read the script or I've watched the show or I have ideas. Like we're all the producers and the directors, they want storytellers along with them. Um, the ones who just want button pushers, they don't. I don't think that lasts very long. I'm sure there are people who disagree with me that there's probably some famous director out there who really just wants you to push buttons for them. But I feel like for the most part, that's not the case. Like it's a collaboration and it's a team, and I need to find what I'm going to bring to the table on any given show. So the project is always something that's inspiring. On Minx, I was a history major also in college, so the idea of getting to do this, to play in the '70s sandbox, and this comedy, uh, that I don't have a ton of comedies on my. I have a few, but I don't have comedies that are this subgenre of comedy on my credits. So it's like, yeah, this is a sandbox that I haven't visited yet. I'm going to be able to really dig in and do some things. And then when the show started getting made, and it was just like, wow, there's like things I didn't even anticipate being in this show, that because I had only read the pilot, and it's like, okay, this is great. Like we've got a lot of interesting work that we get to do here today. You is another great example of a show where we change locations every season. So it's like, I know I did season 3 and it was Silicon Valley and it had a certain palette, and season 4 is going to be in a totally different city, and we're going to have to like figure out how our character is going to destroy that place too, and how what are we going to do about that. And so yeah, there's always inspiration. um, the day that there isn't is the day I should probably retire, but you know
Sounds like that day's still got quite a bit of years ahead of it.
well, yeah, and when you think about it, like we were talking about, like you never really master your craft. Like Spielberg still makes movies. Like
Yeah.
that guy doesn't have to make movies anymore, but he's still got things he wants to try and do. So, I had a film school teacher tell me like nobody ever retires from this business; they just die. Like they'll people he'll keep making movies until he's dead or until he physically can't anymore. Because there's always something new you want to try.
I mean, there's
And it's
people
the
like
same.
Roger Corman still out there who's still talking about his experience working in all these films over the years. And it is, I think, of all the industries, entertainment has this ability to really create lifelong um, professionals out of, because it is so nuanced, and to make it in this industry is much more difficult than it is, say, just to go apply for a job in any other industry. And so there is this almost kind of pride, I think, that comes with being a part of that, and also the addiction to creation, which, that's why you get
Right.
in the first place, right?
Right. Yeah, there's certainly no lack for creativity, and as much as of a grind it can be, it's not a drone type grind, like uh, I can't even think of a job without like insulting the job, but it's not like I'm sitting here just like typing in random numbers into a spreadsheet like all day long every day without putting any thought into anything. Like you know yeah, the hours can sometimes suck and the deadlines can be problematic and you end up exhausted, and you get I think it's something called like production sickness, where I remembered in film school, whenever we finished a shoot, the day after you were done, everybody on the crew was sick because you just come
Yeah.
crashing down from whatever adrenaline high you were on. um like that's the things that happen, but then you recover and you're just like, let's go do it again. And because it's freelance and because it's project based, I never get bored.
Yeah.
Like, so I might be 65, and like I'm hoping, I talk about my retirement every once in a while, but in all honesty, like it's probably going to happen because I lost my hearing, not because I'm tired of doing the work. Um, yeah, it definitely it's never boring. Um, it's it is very engaging mentally. So as fatiguing as that can be sometimes, um, it's great knowing that I get to get up every day and be like, I get to actually like use my brain and my creative sensibilities and make something. And then, there's something that I can go watch. I just finished watching Minx with my wife, and it's like it's weird to be like it's the first time I watched it in 3 weeks, but like it's the first time like I've really sat there watching it without having to like think about my role in it. I just watched the show, and it's just like, man, this is a good show. Like,
It is a very good
you know,
show.
and it's like we did a really good job on this show. Like, go team! Like, yeah, way to go. We made something that we can be proud of. And you know what? Like, to be honest, even the worst projects that I've worked on, I feel like they're better because I worked on it. And that's not an ego thing because I think like I'm
No,
so
no.
great. I'm because we went through the process and we did a thing where we took this raw whatever and we shaped it into whatever it is. Now, the end product might not be amazing, but like we're still proud of the fact it's like we took this thing and we made something on it. And people can go watch it. And like it's hard.
And
And
no one
each
ever sets out
project
to
I
make
work.
a bad movie, like no one ever sets to make a
Yeah.
bad TV show. So I think that, as you're talking about this, it sounds like the reward, the reward is so tangible and it's so, in some cases, maybe not immediate, but it's not prolonged to some extent where you may never get to see it. So you get this chance to not only work on something, see that work come to fruition, but you also get the satisfaction of knowing that this is something that you helped create and that lives on regardless. I think as I get older, the idea of a legacy, not so much like I need to leave some sort of big legacy on this world, but really is you start to think more about your mortality as you age. I'll be 37 this year, so I'm not anywhere near the years where I have to worry about it, so to speak. Touch wood,
Hmm.
but at the same time, you think more about kind of what you leave behind, or if you're a creative, kind of what your mark is. And so, as you talk about this, it just seems so apparent that the love for your work comes from your adoration and love of film and television overall as an
Yeah.
industry, but you found a place with it for yourself where it also suits kind of the things that you enjoy about those elements in a very direct way.
Yeah. We had one of the things that I realized, and it was one of the things that made me really want to get into the business young, was the people who are in it love it just as much. And so there's a real sense of community as you're doing it. When I was 17, maybe 18, I used to go with my father to New York, to the IFP Gotham Awards, which is like the Independent Spirit Awards, but for New York. It was an independent film awards banquet, and get up in a tuxedo and go to the Roseline Ballroom, and they had all the New York film luminaries. And the first year that I went, I took around my program and I was autograph hunting. And I got Robert Altman, Harvey Keitel, Robert De
Wow.
Niro. I sat with David Brown and Helen Gurley Brown. They were sitting at my table. So David Brown, I think, was getting the Lifetime Achievement Award that year. So like
Wow.
I talked to this guy who hired Spielberg for one of his first movies. I was like, wow, this is like incredible. But I realized that year that I was like, I'm sitting here like fawning over these people, but I want to be these people. So like I made this pact to myself. The next year I'm going to talk to somebody. I'm just going to I don't know who, but I'm going to find one of these filmmakers that I admire. I'm going to go have a conversation with them. So the next year I went back, and I got introduced by apparently a mutual friend. It was somebody who was on the IFP board, introduced me to David Cronenberg.
Wow.
Yeah, and say, "Oh, David, this is Ethan. He's a young aspiring filmmaker." And I was just like, "Oh my god, I'm a huge fan of your movies." And he was like, "Oh, which movie?" And I was like, "The Fly is one of my all-time favorite horror movies." And we talked for 45 minutes about The Fly. And he just talked and talked and talked, and it was the nicest guy. But like, it made me realize it's like this guy loves to talk about movies. Like, and I don't think he would have cared if we were talking about his movie or we were talking about any other movie. Like, I think he just wanted to talk about movies, and I was like, you know what? Like, it's not that different from me. You know, uh, I want to talk about movies. The difference is now we're going to go make the movies that we want to talk about. So it's like, get out there and do it. And that was a big thing, even on the mixed stages. All these filmmakers. I had the opportunity to work with John Landis, and I told him The Blues Brothers was probably one of my top five all-time favorite movies. I grew up in Chicago. It's just like you can't
Gospel
not love.
there.
Yeah, it's a seminal movie of my childhood, and we talked about all sorts of things on the mix stage that day. It was like film school 101, but like the energy that these filmmakers all have to just talk about movies, it's just like it's incredible. Even now on the stages, it's just like, what TV show did you guys watch? Oh yeah, I watched that, and then we start talking about other shows and things, and it's like, it,
You get
yeah,
to be around what
that's
you love all the time, and I think that there's
all.
something
Yeah,
to that.
all the time, and the realization, that a guy who is as big and successful and as talented as Cronenberg taking time to talk movies with some 18-year-old nobody, like that meant a lot. And really just because he just wanted somebody to talk to about movies with. Everybody else at that party, he would have probably been talking about business with, but he got to talk about movies with me, and that seemed like the thing he would rather be doing at that particular moment. That was great. So, I mean, that was a real like formative experience of getting to knowing it's like, yeah, this is the thing I want to do. Like,
Could totally see that being a galvanizing experience of just like, wow,
yeah,
I thought I wanted to do this, now I know I want to do this. And you'd mentioned that The Fly and Blues Brothers are some of those are your favorite films. I'm always curious, what are some of your top films? And obviously we have a lot of horror fans that watch these, but ultimately, what are some of the ones that you think like, wow, these are just to me pinnacles of filmmaking or television?
uh, oof. I mean, The Godfather, I think, is pretty close to perfect. Um, you know, the Blues Brothers is on the rewatchability scale. I don't think it's ever been on
Very
a
high.
TV where I haven't stopped and continued to watch it. I think I made my kid watch it when she was like 3 or 4. Uh, like Ferris Bueller's Day Off is another
Oh,
huge one, but also partially because I grew up where John Hughes grew up. So like that was my high school.
oh wow.
Um, yeah, where he picks up Sloane Peterson. That's where I went to high school. Um, so yeah, like those breakfast, like all the John Hughes movies, because those were the movies that were formative when I was growing up because they were all Chicago based and Chicago suburbs based, and so I really love those. The Princess Bride, I think, is um, also perfect, and the more I learn about it, the more perfect I think it is, um, because as you learn about it, you realize how like nobody had any idea what to do with it, because everybody wanted to pigeonhole this thing that spans genres, all over the place. It's like, wow, what a great movie. Um,
A true adventure movie, when you think about it's the sentiment you feel watching it, in that you actually feel like you're going through this adventure because of how almost obscure some of the things that happen to the characters are.
yeah, and it's really such the perfect escapist movie. Like you can't watch it and not lose yourself in the fun of it. And yeah, I mean rewatchability. It's like I know every line in the movie. I know when they're all going to come up. They're still funny. Like it still makes me feel good to watch that movie. I'm trying to think of like some others. Like Lord of the Rings and The Matrix came out right at the time that I was starting to really get involved with sound, and so those were
Oh wow.
real formative. Yeah, I was
Especially the
telling
Matrix, I can imagine.
Yeah, I was actually telling this funny story. Or I think it's funny to me anyway. So the sound supervisor, the sound designer on The Matrix, is a guy named Dane Davis. And so because I saw The Matrix and that movie blew me away. Like, I mean, it blew everybody away visually and what they were doing with bullet time and whatever. And then the sound of that movie is just so spectacular. And when I was at my first machine room job in LA, one of the engineers there had a contact at Dolby, and every year Dolby has a party the 2 nights before the Oscars where all the nominees and all the bigwigs in the sound community go. And he scored me an invitation to that party. And, I only knew one person at the party, another sound editor. And I started talking to her, and she knows everybody. She's been around forever. And Dane Davis happened to just walk by, and she grabbed him by the arm and said, "Hey, Dane, you should meet these two guys." And it was me and my friend of mine who was also in the machine room with me, and I talked to Dane about all that stuff for a really long time, and it was just like, wow, like that movie, yeah, that movie. And then I got to work with Ethan Van Der Ven, who's the supervising sound editor on Lord of the Rings. I worked with him on Transformers, so it was
Oh wow.
like, huh, yeah, like I kind of feel like I've made it now. Like I'm at an industry party, and Dane Davis is sitting here talking to me about what projects I'm working on. You know,
I would
like
agree
that's
with you. When you're rubbing elbows with people that you admire, or in some cases even aspire to be in some ways, I think that that's definitely a sign of having
yeah,
made it.
yeah, and it's been interesting because they're like, don't meet your heroes. It's like, I mean, the names that I've already dropped, like, couldn't have been better experiences. Like people who like we're all just people, you know. Um, and so yeah, it's been great. There's a photograph of me somewhere at that party with Dane somewhere because one of those group photographers goes around and takes those pictures. I have no idea where that photograph is, but that was definitely a memory of the first time I went to one of those parties and not knowing anybody and only knowing names. I didn't even don't even think I knew faces. I just knew names. And you suddenly see the names, and it's like, great. I played back a movie that I did a number of years ago now. God, it's probably been like 10 years ago. We wanted to play back on a bigger mixing room for the executive producers, and the facility gave us the big mixing stage at Tadeo, where Mike Minkler, who's been nominated for 20 something Oscars probably, that was the stage that he was on, and I was like, man, I'm sitting in Mike Minkler's chair right now, like watching my movie like up on that screen. It's like, this is great. Um, so yeah, even now, I mean, you're always excited. It's
I mean,
always
Ethan, your passion for this just kind of it's like you can feel it almost through the screen. Obviously, we're talking virtually, but it just there's a deep care I think that you have, and just your point of view on not just the industry overall, but also the kind of relationship that the work you do and your team does has with the rest of production just goes to show that I think when people think about the dauntingness of entering the industry, they also forget that how vast it is. And that, if you really believe in the art of creation, particularly when it comes to entertainment and film and television, all it really means is that you just want to be around other people that like those things too. So there's always an entry point. But
yeah,
at the same time, you have to stick with it. But in doing so, it's kind of a exponential return in that ways because you're doing what you love. You get to meet more people that love doing it, and through the process, you get better at your craft, which in turn makes you more, valuable, so to speak, or for lack of a better term. Um, uh, your job prospects get a little better throughout. So, kind of seems like a
yeah,
perfect harmony.
yeah. I mean, I think you're right. Like, if there was like just an overarching life philosophy, it's find your people. I've been telling this to my kid is 13 now, and right at that age where we were thinking about this, where when you're in elementary school, like you're forced to be with the same 20 people every single day, and you don't have any agency. But when you get into middle school, and now there's more clubs and there's more things, it's like, go find your people. Like, they're out there somewhere. You just have to, like, you haven't ever had this opportunity. And as you go on through life, like when you pick what college you want to go to, what you think you want to study or whatever, it's like, find your people wherever they are. Go. Like, my people were always movie people, and getting to have those conversations when I was in high school, there weren't that many of us. In fact, there were very, very few of us that I knew about. Turns out there were a lot more of us than I ever
Yeah,
realized, and
but the
maybe
internet
that was
happened,
my
right?
right. Well, that was my own ego being like, I'm the only person who loves movies as much as I do, and rah, 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 rah. But I'm actually going to dinner tonight with somebody that I've known since I was 2 years old. I had no idea she was a filmmaker, but she saw my name on the credits of Minx, and is out here for a film festival with one of her projects. And we became Facebook friends a couple of weeks ago, and I was like, oh, you're in LA, we should get together. I had no idea you were a filmmaker. This is great. We've had this shared thing for 40 years, and I had no idea. So like, it was kind of a pleasant surprise. It's like, yeah, those I had those people back then. I just didn't know about it. So find your people. Getting to go to those parties, I'm obviously very, very privileged that I had those resources and whatever to meet and interact with people who are on the level that I wanted to get to from a very early age, and realizing like, yeah, these are my people. And film school is the best because you go from high school where there might be three of you, and you go to film school where suddenly there's
Everybody.
150 of you, and it's like we're all those people, which is actually kind of why like I gravitated out of directing a little bit, because it's like suddenly you're just like, oh, those people, they're they're directors, like they have something slightly different than I do, or they've been doing it for that much longer or whatever. And it's like, but you know what, like I can produce their movies with the best of them, like that's what I'm going to gravitate towards. And it's not a conscious thing really, you just sort of like your path gets carved. Like when you find your people, you find your spot in the circle there. And eventually that circle ended up being sound, and now like it's great. I'm with my people every day.
I mean, this sounds. I mean, I would agree that that's great advice to give anybody. Is find your people, and in turn, you will find quite a bit of happiness throughout. And I think I've been so grateful for your time today, Ethan. I have one last question for you, which is,
Mm-hmm.
you know, aside from Minx, which is just released on HBO, what else are you working on that you're able to share with us? And particularly anything related to the horror adjacent stuff, our audience certainly loves. But anything's
Uh,
open.
is Riverdale considered horror?
I think
I have no
so.
idea. Yeah,
I would
do
I
you
would
think?
consider it horror. This version of
Yeah,
Riverdale is the Archie comics they're based off of. Maybe not as much, but this
yeah.
particular CW version, yes.
So we just got picked up for season 7. So
Congratulations.
yeah. So I'm assuming I'm being invited back for that. And that'll be great. I'd love to see. I don't know if we're gonna go past season 7, but I want to see that show through to its conclusion. So yeah, I'll be going back to that in the fall. We're still working on that now. I think we finish beginning of July, mid July. We'll be finished with season 6. I'm doing, like I mentioned, a new Pretty Little Liars that Roberto Aguirre Sacasa is executive producing, from Riverdale. Um, so that's also going to be on HBO Max. I think that starts airing in July, maybe. Don't quote me on that though. I could be wrong. Um, that's also very horror centric.
Yes.
Got another murder in small town America, um, trying to kill some poor teenage girls. And then You has got a, although certainly becoming more and more satirical as the seasons go on.
Quite a ridiculous
That's
ending to the most recent season, I would admit. But hey, that's why you watch, right? Like you watch for the
oh
absurdity.
yeah, I love, I started on that show on season 3, and so I binged 1 and 2, and the progression of the tone of that show I find fascinating. Like it's not often that you see a show get better and better as it goes and like really finds its way. And I think like that one really has. I thought season 3 was the best of the 3 seasons. And yes, I'm biased without a doubt, but yeah. So I'm really excited for season 4 of that. I start working on that in June. And that, so there's going to be some overlap with that in Riverdale, and then there'll be some overlap on the end of that in Riverdale. Um, and then some irons in the fire, that hasn't been confirmed. Some interviews that I'm supposed to hopefully have. Some friends who are hopefully getting movies off the ground, but nothing's been confirmed. So, can't really say who, what, when, where, why, or any
Yeah.
of that fun stuff. But I hope they do, because, what little I know about them is, something that I'm going to be really happy if I can get on those projects. I'm gonna keep on going for it and see what happens. So that's what's coming up.
Well, that
Uh,
sounds. I mean, all those three shows sound. I mean, I know I'm a personal fan. I know quite a few of our viewers are as well. And if people aren't watching you and are watching horror movies, then you should definitely move you up on queue because it is almost exactly a horror movie, just with I think it's a dark comedy horror movie. I would almost call it. But
yeah, it's such a weird genre bending thing because it's like, yeah, it's a serial killer psychological thriller, but yeah, it's a dark comedy. also, like, I mean, there's definitely things where you're gonna laugh at. Like, I think you're intended to laugh at how angry this person is about everything. Yeah, and the satire in season three I thought was pretty spot on, perfect.
Particularly if you know the Silicon Valley area at all. I think they captured
Yeah,
the tone of that part of the country quite well,
yeah,
down to the people, the locations, just the attitudes. Um, so was very much
yeah,
impressed with that.
yeah, and I'm always like because so much low budget filmmaking tends to be horror movies. A lot of my
Yeah.
indie movies veer that way. I did two movies during COVID. One's not a horror movie, but it is a horror movie. Although I can't really say what it is yet. I'll hit you up when I know that they have a release or a distribution deal in place. I still try to do those movies as much as I can. Also, as much as I have time for, I do love working with first time or independent filmmakers. I'm sitting in I have my own home studio here, so I'm able to do a lot of lower budget movies for relatively inexpensive and just meet people. Part of the this side of the business is helping other people make their movies. So if I stop doing that, I feel like I'm doing a disservice to the
Mm.
craft itself. So yeah, I'm always on the hunt. Always, hopefully, schedule's always an issue, but hopefully get more. I have a lot of lower budget independent movies on my credits list. So
I took a look through them. I was doing was cherry picking some for my introduction for you. And again, I saw some familiar films. I actually happen to own three of the Malevolence films right behind me.
oh
Uh,
yeah, that was one of my very very first. I still talk to Steven on occasion. We're Facebook friends. Yeah, he like talk about a guy who forged his path, that way, who just was obsessed with horror movies and figured out how to get them made. Like, he's a his ambition is as admirable as anybody I've ever known. Yes, in fact, he got three of those movies made, and then I think there's a fourth one that's like not a Malevolence movie, but
I'll have to find
that.
that one because I'm a fan of the series, and I think it's so inspiring. I think just to see, as you kind of shared before, around seeing people that you went to film school or people you met kind of come into these positions. I have similar sentiments around folks I went to high school with. One of them's actually running his short through a few festivals right now, and
Mhm.
seeing people go and pursue that again, I think that makes all the difference. But you also root for people along the way as well. You're like, hey, I want that person to make that movie. I
Yeah,
want that person to put that vision out there. And as you
I,
said, helping people pay it forward keeps the business thriving.
yeah, I want everybody to make their movie in some form. I think like the process is it because it is so hard, um, that I don't want to see you fail at it. Like, and not to say like I want, like, I don't even care. Like, the movie is going to have a life of its own regardless of what happens. But like, I want to see you get to the finish line and have something you can be proud of. I have a friend who I did his. I wasn't going to do his movie. I had to turn it down because they had like literally zero money, and I was just slammed. I was mixing 4 or 5 shows at the time. But he was somebody that was introduced to me by a friend of mine, and he has a ton of energy and ambition, and I really like the guy. And I said, look, I'll consult. So whoever does your sound job, uh, whoever you get, let me know. And he got somebody who I don't think had ever done it before. Um, and he showed me the mix and was like, "What do you think?" And I was like, "You can't put this in front of people. Like, you can't. I can't let you do it." And I ended up spending like a week or two just trying to get it into some sort of presentable shape because I was just like, I can't let you go out in the world with this. Like, we can do better. You and I, we can do better, and we're gonna go do better. And like, screw it, I'm just gonna do it. and, yeah, so went and did that. And he paid it back tenfold. Like, he's been doing a whole bunch of like industrials and stuff like that, like well-paying jobs, and has kicked me all of them, and it's just like, thank you so much for helping me make your movie. It's like, yeah, man, like I couldn't. I can. Oh, I'm sure he's gonna come to me for his next movie, and that's what it's about. Like, let's go make movies together. It's playtime.
Yeah.
You know, like we
It's
do.
just hearing you talk about this is so endearing, especially because again, you know, this idea of keeping you wouldn't want your friend to put out a bad product, or at least a product that you could do a little better on.
Mhm.
So you kind of support each other through this. And again, you know, as you said, it paid off in this case, but you're always learning, you're always doing something, you're always growing. And that's kind of the themes I'm picking up from this conversation is that, you know, you always
Yeah,
have to have this lifelong curiosity, this desire to learn and grow and love what you do.
yeah, and it's, you know, it's a little bit of a gamble because like he might never make a movie again, but like if he does, I'm gonna get first crack at it. And um, you know, you learn things from each other, and I think he learned from the mistakes that he made along the way, and I learned from the mistakes that he made along the way. And you know, yeah, you do, in a way you do become friends with these people. You know, I met him on that project. Like I did the trailer for it so that he could go raise money to make the movie. But you know, you become friends because, like I said, you work so closely with these people and you spend just days and locked in a room together in a windowless room. That like you end up liking each other. It's like, yeah, I can't let you do this, man. You know, and like my friends from film school, when they make movies, I generally try to drop everything to do it because like these are these are the people we started the dream. I had a year where I did 3 movies. One of them was a horror movie, a movie called Keep Watching that my friend Sean Carter made. His short film was the first film I ever did sound for. His NYU short film was the first film I ever did sound for. Um, you know, we've been friends ever since. He made another short years later that I did, and then when he got his movie made, he fought for me to do that, and I did Keep Watching with him. Like the same year, I did another lower budget movie called Hole in the Wall, which is about a taco vendor in New York, and then I did a movie with one of my longest standing collaborators, a guy named Joe Miali. We did a movie called Revolt, which was a sci-fi alien invasion action movie that I think is on Netflix. You know, and I've done almost everything that he's done. I've done the sound for. Like we've been on this great journey together, and yeah, if and when he gets another movie off the ground, it's just like I'm if you'll have me, I'm doing it. Like I'm not saying no. So those are the experiences. Like yeah, find your people, and the job will never not be fun.
Ethan, I want to thank you again so much for your time and just sharing with, you know, myself and the rest of the people that will be watching this, your experience, you know, your wisdom, and also some of your stories. And again, we'll make sure that people are aware of the Minx is available out now on HBO Max.
Hmm.
It's not horror related, but it is hilarious, and it's also important historical kind of artifact as well. And I know that there's folks that watch this that are big Riverdale you fans, so I'm sure that we'll see your name popping up more and more now that we're aware of it. And again, thank you, Ethan, so much for your
Yeah,
time and for
and if
your
anybody,
choice.
I'm always available. Well, to some extent, I try to be as available as I possibly can be. If there's, you know, filmmakers, young filmmakers, sound people want to be, you know, whatever's like my. I think my DMs on Twitter are open. I hope. If not, I don't know if you have. You and I can talk about ways to get a hold of me if somebody says they'd really like to talk about whatever. Like I'm definitely down. As
Yeah,
you
of
can tell,
course.
I can talk about this for days.
Well, you'll be in good company because I'm quite sure anybody you'd interact with that we'd send your way would be wanting to talk about this stuff as well. Because we're all at our hearts, whether we enjoy horror, sci-fi, fantasy, or something else altogether, we're all film fans first and foremost.
Yeah,
So thank you so much again, Ethan. It's been a pleasure meeting and speaking with you. And again, everyone, you can go and check out the Minx now. And certainly, as Ethan says, if you have a question about the industry, feel free to slide into his DMs.
yep.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.